Hey everybody, it is March 9th, and this is kind of becoming my idea show where it's almost like I have notes while I'm walking. I have to do some exercise to kind of, well, everyone should do exercise anyway, but I have to do some exercise to kind of get my blood flowing, try to stay in good enough shape so I can fight some of the things I'm dealing with. So I can't do sports or anything anymore. I can't even swim. I fucked up my left shoulder doing that, and my shoulders were messed up anyway. But now it's like I got to wear like a shoulder brace all the time. But anyway, I digress. So I kind of babble. Like that's the real Babbles show, is me walking in the morning. But if I put that on the air, I'd probably be shot. I don't know what people would call me, but racist, homophobic, blah, blah, blah. You're not really allowed to speak anymore these days. Not in that way. So what I do is I do the notes and I get the ideas from them. So it's kind of like my safe space, where I have a safe space to say things that might otherwise be taken the wrong way. And then I can get to some ideas. And we don't really have that as far as in the U.S., you can't really just kind of really stream of consciousness on radio. It's just on radio, TV, internet, any of that, because there's just too much self-censoring. If you're, and what's funny is it's usually the side you're on that's the biggest censor, which is kind of one of the points I wanted to make today. The echo chamber, once you enter let's say a right wing or a left wing echo chamber, no one's going to be nastier to you than somebody who thinks you're not a true right winger or left winger. Okay, I think CGP Grey did a video years ago about this, where people get like incensed that somebody might challenge part of a narrative, even if they completely agree with you. I'll give you an example. My first subject today. Now, I'm anti-GMO as far as, we need to study them. We need to make sure they're safe. We shouldn't be modifying crops so they could take a ton more herbicides and pesticides, because then the herbicides and pesticides kill us. They also have, by the way, that's the story of glycophosphate. You might want to look that up. You can Google it as far as how dangerous it is. And it's linked to autism. And other neurological disorders. Now, the other thing they're doing is they're modifying plants to have their own pesticides. Now, if you think about it, caffeine's a pesticide, right? So if they make coffee beans that have more caffeine, awesome, right? I mean, no one really minds that. But if they start producing some sort of weird chemical that we don't know how it works against the body, then we got to be careful. So that's basically the point I made. And it was actually a friend of mine who runs a health and wellness site and a group. And he came out and he was like, with GMOs, it's kind of up in the air. You can't say that GMOs are inherently dangerous, but they have a great possibility of being so because of what I just laid out. And I said, you know what? Thank you for saying that. I think that having some sort of sense about it really gets people to pay attention more to what you're saying. If you're just like, GMO, Frankenfood, bad, and you don't know why, and you don't know which specific ones, as opposed to, what's it called? Golden rice, I think. It was like they greatly increased the vitamin K in this rice, and that's an example of a GMO food. And it's actually saved a lot of lives as far as vitamin deficiency. So you basically kind of like when you add vitamin D3 to milk. We do it in a bunch of ways where we add vitamins to certain foods and cereals, and milk, and I think even orange juice, they do it sometimes. So things get vitamized, and that's kind of what they did with this rice crop. That doesn't mean it's easy to grow, or that it's, there's all sorts of other problems, because a lot of times they're built to only be grown in this kind of Monsanto type of like gook. That's basically kind of like motor oil. They have to use all these petroleum products to grow the food, and that's a limited resource, so that's not the smartest way of doing it, right? But anyway, so there's like real stuff to look at. There's real stuff to be concerned about. And one of the members was like, no GMO is ever good. It's always bad. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I didn't think this was like, a religious site. And that made a couple people laugh because it is an ideology. If you're going to take it as an ideology, you're already kind of wrong. You can't take a scientific concept where people are talking about the scientific ins and outs and then just go, my religion says GMOs are bad. That's kind of ridiculous. I mean, if you want to have that conversation, go to like a religious site and do that. But this person kind of lambasted me, and I was like, what, fuck this. This is the first time I really saw what CGP Grey was talking about, how we have to conform, and it's the people within the group that have the zealotry of the ideology that are really the dangerous ones. And what's funny is a bunch of people laughed. They made positive comments, thought this person was an asshole. But I still was like, what? I'm not going to be in this kind of echo chamber and get attacked for this. Because it became like two sides. The GMO zealots and the people who had real scientific concerns about GMOs. And I had to apologize to my friend who ran the group. Like, I just can't. I don't want to be in that. I don't want to deal with people who are zealots. Even if they're on my side, they're on my side in the wrong way. I'd rather them not be on my side. Because they would be such great enemies because they're so stupid. It would make you look great to have enemies like that. And that happens in a lot of the left and the right. There are zealots. There are people who treat it like a religion. That's what we used to say about communism in Russia, that it was a state religion as opposed to an ideology of government. And that holds true. I mean, in China, I don't know if you saw 7 Years in Tibet, there was a Chinese general. I don't know if it was supposed to be Mao or just a general. And he comes in and he sees this kind of religious thing they do with sand. It's like this beautiful, intricate thing that takes like, all these guys like months to complete. And they did it as like a gift. Like, see, this is what we made for you. And he's like, religion is stupid. And he crosses it out. This huge amount of disrespect for their beliefs. But in the same way, he had a belief system that was religious. And I think that anytime somebody turns a non-religious belief system, especially, into a belief system, there's no longer those checks and balances of, oh, this is a religion. Okay, you can do A, but you can't do B. Right? You could preach your religion as much as you want, but you can't pretend it's scientific. You could, gather in a church, a synagogue, a temple, whatever you want to do, but you can't run the government or use the sword of government for your own means. And it is the non-religions, the ideologies that go up to a religion, that have zealots, etc., all the signs of religion that are pretending not to be a religion, that are the most dangerous. Those are the people who try to get the sword of government and use it against others. Those are the people who will sit there in like a group where you're discussing what should we do about GMOs. We have to think of it scientifically so we could actually make a statement and say, well, we want people to know if they're GMOs, and then we could go into which GMO is bad, which is good, which is, which maybe isn't bad, what, glyphosate is bad or not, like you could go into the details, right? As opposed to just GMO bad. That's like saying fire bad. Yeah. If you're on fire, it's bad. If you're cooking your food, not so bad, is it? So it's basically like a simplistic, childish thing. And it's also kind of a misplacement of religion. You're not supposed to believe in religion, GMO's bad or not, right? You might be against it because it's against God or something like that. But for the most part, most religions don't give a shit about GMOs. It's basically like, crossbreeding. It may be done badly or it may be done well. Unfortunately, it's being done so that they can take more herbicides and pesticides, for the most part. Not always. There was that Special K rice, I guess it's called, or Golden Canilla. I don't remember. And there were problems with that, by the way. It wasn't just, super rice that saved everybody. It was really hard to grow. You had to, like I said, you had to use the special chemicals, etc. It had to it for some reason took a lot more water. So, if you're in an area that has droughts, it's actually a worse rice to use because now you have none, as opposed to having, this low yield, no extra vitamin K or whatever. So it's a complicated situation, and only religion can take a complicated situation and boil it down into something really, really simple. So when you see that happening, you know that whatever ideology has been raised to a religion, at least in the minds of the people who are saying these stupid things. So it's so what do? You kind of have to label it a religion. I mean, you flat out state, if you ever talking to somebody who's treating the GMO thing or anything in these simplistic terms, it's like, well, that I'm sorry if I'm offending your religious belief. Make fun of them for having a religious belief, right? A lot of these people are atheists, and they constantly make fun of any sort of spiritual or religious belief. So throw that back at them. Maybe it'll open their eyes a little bit, since it's so antithetical to so many of the things they say. And that's why I'm not on any atheist sites, even though I am kind of an atheist. My beliefs in God are very different, to the point where it might as well be atheism. But when I saw how atheists talked about religion, and the lack of respect for its spiritual side, I couldn't be a part of it. It got very, very irritating, because their ideology was a competing religion. They weren't pointing out the good and bad. They were just pointing out, just like somebody who might be a Calvinist is talking about the Catholics. It was the same sort of conversation. And those are very dangerous people. Because they don't realize themselves that they're following some sort of religion. That's why I always kind of struggle with what to call like the far left, because a lot of them are just well-meaning people, but then you get the zealots, and I guess maybe that's what they should be called, the far left zealots, as opposed to the far left. And it should be plainly stated that they're not really even on the spectrum. They're a totally different thing. They're bringing back ancient times as far as fascism, a state religion that uses the sword of state to destroy the other religions. It's an ugly thing, man. It happens on the right sometimes. They try to bash people over the head with Christianity or certain tenets of it. Well, I think this is Cuban coffee. They said it was espresso, but it tastes pretty strong. Anyway, yeah, I'll always have a coffee comment in all of my shows. I can't go that long without drinking something. I get dried out, and that something is usually some coffee, because I got stuff to do. So, what was my other idea today? I think it's pretty plain how I feel about these kind of leftist zealots and the right. However they use it. You always have to kind of be on the lookout for zealotry in every group, and those are the people that should honestly be kicked out, because when it gets to that point, they're not just a danger to the enemy, they're a danger to the organization and all the people in it. And they're going to push people out of it because of their hatred of the zealots, and now you're going to get this split. And you might end up on the wrong side of it, where you're in the zealot camp and you don't even know how you ended up there, because you just mistakenly supported somebody's ideology that was more of a religion than an opinion. A religious belief than an opinion. So that's why I talk about that. But moving on. So, as many of you might know, I have some issues, let's say. I grew up basically in a panic attack until about 15, 16. I started getting medication for it, but it was an antidepressant. Those don't work very well, by the way, for panic disorder. I mean, they do help, but they're not like in any way a cure. They're kind of like a helper. They help a lot more with depression. And because of this panic and maybe an additional depressive disorder, I had some really severe ongoing depression. And I can't stop taking the antidepressant without it basically coming back within a few days. And that's both. I get like these like racing heart things. I get, it feels dangerous. It feels like, something could happen. Like I could have a heart attack. Of course, and also in the other way, I get so depressed I can't move. But I have some physical problems on top of that might be related. I have this kind of muscle tension problem where my muscles all tense up. That's typical of anxiety patients. And I have to take a muscle relaxant every day called Norflex in order to kind of calm that down. I also, in addition to the antidepressant, I take like something called Boost Spar, which kind of works, kind of doesn't. I also have problems with all my joints, mostly from my neck out, like the middle of the shoulders out. So my shoulders and my arms, I still get these giant cracks, like my joints cracking all over the place. But at least when I have the medication, the one I was talking about is meloxicam, it's not as bad in my lower body and in my back. It's really my upper body, this kind of shoulder area, like from the middle of my back up to like the base of my skull, and then out towards my hands. All the joints are inflamed, depending on how well medicated I am. And even with the medications I have for my back, which work pretty well on my back as long as I don't use it, I can't sit for very long. I have to lay down after sitting for a certain amount of time, or I have to wear my back brace all day. I can't really lean forward over a desk. So these are some of the things I'm going through. Well, I also have this kind of cognitive issue, especially when I'm talking to somebody, either over the phone or in person, where I don't mention things because I forget about them, and I forget that I forgot. Like I could literally be in a 5-minute conversation, and from the beginning to the end of it, I could be like, wait, didn't I mention X, Y, and Z? Oh, I must have mentioned that already. And I know I repeat myself sometimes even on my show. And I'm caffeinated and chain smoking to kind of keep my brain about me. And still, I have these memory problems. I'm very ADHD. I've always been ADHD, but it's gotten a lot worse as far as inattentive, forgetting things. So sometimes I don't mention what I need to mention. People just look at me like, well, what do you need? You look good. You look like you're healthy. And if I don't wear my braces that I need to kind of be able to get around for more than 10 minutes, people assume I'm just regular average Joe guy, even if I'm there kind of telling them I have this and that problem. So I tend to wear the braces more often than I even need to, just to kind of make the point. It's weird how you can wear a back brace and a shoulder brace and all that, and then suddenly people will believe you that you have these problems. But if, let's say, you're hopping out of the house for 10 minutes and you don't wear them, they just assume that none of that could possibly be going on with you, because they don't understand that you can make it for 10 minutes, right? And I used to be able to make it for longer, so it was even worse. So people would assume, oh, he's just, he's a hypochondriac or something. Until they see like the MRI report, then they're like, okay, maybe he's not so much of a hypochondriac. So my idea, in order to make this more complete, because in so many ways I'm depending on like doctors to send notes, and these notes don't, these kind of summaries don't necessarily match what I've been telling, Social Security or vocational rehabilitation. So I'm going to basically do like a me report on what's going on with me physically, so I could kind of go through it with them. Because I'm going to try to go to some different clinics, because I was going to this like 1-star clinic, and it wasn't a public thing. It was more like a private charity thing. And they would charge me, like they would do it on a sliding scale, but they would still charge me, and they know I can't afford it. I'm on food stamps and shit. But I would have to pay for certain services because it wasn't like federally funded. It was like state funded only. I don't know what was going on. They wouldn't answer my questions because they wanted me to stay there, and that's kind of fucked up already. And when I asked to get some sort of records, they didn't show up. One place did, one place didn't. I was dealing with two kind of pseudo-public type of things. But now I know there's a county free clinic near me that's a lot closer than the other ones. So I'm going to go to that, and I need to really lay out what's going on with me so they don't do that whole like, we're done here, right? We're done here, right? And then you're like, no, I don't think so, but I can't think of what we're not done here with. Like your brain draws it blank. And that's happened to me a lot. And it's actually one of my symptoms, but it's, no one's seeing it as that yet. They're just seeing it as, oh, you got nothing else to complain about. No, I have a lot to talk about and a lot to try to get some treatment for, but my mind kind of draws a blank. It's very confused. I don't know what doctors are saying I have as opposed to what I have, because they don't normally show you the diagnosis until you get the records or some sort of synopsis of the records. They just kind of go, oh, it could be this, we'll try this. I had one doctor, my rheumatologist, who just said I have arthritis. And it was like, okay, what kind? Because different ones, some react to movement, some are actually made worse by movement. So which one is it? He's like, you got arthritis. We'll try things and we'll figure out what it is by what we try. Unfortunately for me, I had a negative rheumatoid factor. Doesn't mean I don't have rheumatoid, because there is actually an arthritis called negative rheumatoid factor arthritis. That's rheumatoid arthritis, but it doesn't show up on the rheumatoid test somehow. I don't know any of that. It could be psoriatic. I have psoriasis, so it could be psoriatic. It could be osteo. I don't know. I don't even know how to tell. And I studied a bunch of this to try to figure it out. And at some point, I might have known a little better, but I forgot all of that shit because I have kind of like this weird early onset dementia. And it could be that certain forms of arthritis come with almost like a chronic fatigue syndrome. So I could be going through that, or it could be that and the medications, because they're all like, drowsiness-causing medications. I don't know. I need help to figure that out so I could kind of move on, and that's what I think the safety net would be for. I'm a 41-year-old man. I want to get my life together. And I have these challenges, and I really have disabilities. I meet the definition as far as what they say on their websites, but not necessarily when they don't get reports from the doctors, they don't just believe you, And unfortunately, they requested reports, and a lot of doctors didn't send them. Actually, none of my doctors did until recently that I started ordering them to my own address. So today is going to be getting all that. I don't care if I have to draw cartoons and, point little arrows that said these joints hurt, which might be a little weird considering the one that no matter what feels better is the middle finger on my left hand. It's actually deformed a little bit. And so pointing that out might get a little vulgar. So I have to be careful about that. And I have psoriasis under all my fingernails and toenails. It makes it more likely. But it seems like the only thing that helps it isn't the movement, but the medication. So it might be rheumatoid or osteo, or I don't know. I'm not a rheumatologist, and I really kind of need somebody with at least, a GP who could kind of, at least order a few tests, order some x-rays, actually an MRI of the hands. A lot of times these things in the early stages don't show up on the x-rays. They have to be like really bad. And I'm sure my middle finger on my left hand is going to show. But then they're just going to consider the problem of the middle finger of my left hand, no matter how much I'm talking about not being able to use my joints much in my hands. So it's a sticky situation where I don't have the obvious evidence. Even I show people my left hand and they're like, okay. Like, what do you mean, okay? It's like obviously deformed. Is that like how your hands are usually look? Well, yeah, now. It didn't used to. I'm also taking like glucosamine chondroitin. I don't think that's hurting me in any way. That's probably helping me. So I still have this, even though I'm taking a double dose of that with MSM and D3 and the muscle relaxant and the meloxicam for the inflammation. So it's like there's things already going on. There's things already trying to help me. They're just either not enough, or I have additional joint problems other than just that can be taken care of with this type of medication. Maybe I might need biologics, like Humira, but I'm not getting that, and I'm going to need that to work, right? Even if I end up where I still have I have to use uppers half the day, and I have to kind of work from home because the uppers basically cancel out anything that helps me with anxiety. At least anything I've used so far. Maybe there are better. But I never really got help when I had Medicaid in New York. I probably talked about this before, but it bears repeating. I got, was it free? I think the medication I could pay $1 or $3, something like that, or not pay at all. So that was, that's pretty cool. I think New York spends the most on Medicaid per person next to Connecticut. I think they're number one, but that may be outdated. But anyway, for the amount of money that they spend on Medicaid, it's not always very effective. A lot of people are kind of pulling from that pot, and it seems that the social services are kind of overwhelmed. And the doctors are kind of flippant, and they don't really try to figure things out in any detail. They try to go to the simplest solution, give you whatever, and get the hell on and get to somebody else. I had one doctor I had to see on Tuesday nights because he worked at a hospital until I think 6 or 6:30 whenever he got out, and we would be waiting there even though we had 6:30 appointments till 7-8 o'clock for him to come in, so that he can kind of look at our file and write a script or whatever. It's really just kind of bare bones kind of thing. And that's okay if it's like, okay, your problem is that, you injured like your shoulder, and you need to, you just need some treatment for that. It's one thing if you have like simple things going on, but once it gets more complicated, you can't just kind of give somebody a pain pill and tell them to have a good day. It doesn't work like that. People are a bit more complex. We're, the most complex biological being so far. So when someone has these kind of autoimmune things going on, they have mood disorders and anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, maybe schizotypal. There's a lot of things detracting from their functioning. And it's not fair to just kind of say, hey, here's a Tylenol, or an extra, or a Tylenol with codeine. Right? Especially if it's kind of more of a lifelong thing as opposed to just some sort of like a injury that needs to heal. I think we do a much better job if somebody's on Medicaid because they get like, injured badly. Because that's what we're good at. We're good at acute medicine. Something happens, there's an obvious result, and then we can go in and go, okay, here's how we fix it. Put metal plates and screws in places. We have all sorts of, expert surgeons who can get you back to functioning. But if you have a more complicated problem or a set of problems, honestly, the regular, having regular insurance, often it's a chore. And this, I'm talking about like the old 80s insurance where you were really covered. And you just had some like $10 copays. Not this kind of like basically Medicaid for all that we have now, where it's somewhere, but it's definitely worse than the 80s insurance. It's somehow a little bit better than Medicaid, depending on the doctor. But not by enough. They used to say in like, what is it, the 1600s during the Baroque era, all the doctors, the best in the land, are here to see the king. He should be dead within an hour. Good doctors cure you, bad doctors kill you quicker. I think we're in a stage where, the doctors aren't necessarily killing us, but they are definitely, they're doing harm. By not treating people the right way. By, you could go back and forth to a doctor and they never really help you. Or they help you in this little level. Like, one of the things that happened to me is that, if I sit around and I do nothing, I'm not in pain. Right? Now, if I could just get a job sitting around doing nothing, like a battery in the Matrix, I'd be great. But that's not possible. So I need more than that in order to function. So I would tell them, listen, if I sit around and do nothing, usually I got to a point where it was like 80%, right? Where I had like, the pain was greatly diminished when I was doing nothing. But if I, started typing on a keyboard or anything like that, trying to sit for a lengthy period of time without my back brace, all these things would kind of start hurting again if I leaned forward a little bit. Like I can't do the dishes for more than 10 minutes. It doesn't matter if I have a back brace or not. And that's just not a convenient man excuse. That's what I'm dealing with. So I would get to this point where it's like I can't really complain if I'm doing nothing. I'm not in any pain. But the minute I start moving around and trying to do things, I'm in pain, or everything stiffens up first. It gets harder and harder to move. And then as I try to move, as everything's getting stiffer, it becomes painful. And there's like a lack of mobility that kind of hits first. And then as I keep trying to move, it gets more and more painful. I get into that L shape. That some of you might know if you have back problems, or maybe you've seen like the old spine patients in the supermarket where they kind of have a walker and they're shaped like an upside down L, capital L, by the way. So I got to get this together this report supposedly, so I can make sure I'm actually telling them what's going on and not just kind of letting them lead me to the another tunnel. Because that's what happens with doctors, especially if they're in a hurry. Maybe they don't believe you. They kind of usher you out, and they will ask, like, oh, is anything else going on? But they'll do it in a very, here's your last chance to tell me something. And you're like, oh, okay, so we'll set another appointment. Oh, no, I have something else. I just can't remember. And you just kind of get pushed out, or they do the thing where it's like, oh, your blood sugar came up high, or your what's it called? Your lipid profile came up high. So we want to put you on like XYZ medication, this black box medication. I remember that happened to me, and I was like, dude, I mean, I'm coming in with all these problems I need help with, and you're like, well, we can give you a statin. And it's like, oh, you fucking asshole. That is not helping me. And even the statin may not be helping me. They say it lowers your numbers, but it doesn't actually get rid of the risk of heart attack, or it doesn't even lower that. It just lowers your numbers. So I don't, when that happens, I get a little pissy because it's like, oh man, dude. Yes, okay, you're right. I have a high lipid profile. My A1C is high. I've been off my diet. I need to get back on it. Cool. But could we concentrate on the other things? I remember one doctor told me, oh, I don't see any sign of inflammation. And I obviously had like a deformed finger. All my joints were swollen, right? I'm like, okay, visually you can see the signs of inflammation. And then because I had like a high blood sugar and a high lipid profile that month, they didn't pay attention to all these signs of inflammation, like white blood cell count was really high. And they were like, and they're telling me, oh, you don't have any inflammation. It's like, dude, that is the sign of inflammation. Like, where the fuck did you go to med school or nursing school or whatever you went to? That like the major sign of inflammation isn't a sign of inflammation. The number one sign of inflammation. And that was like, that took me like 30 seconds to Google? What would be a sign of inflammation? Bam. I also got high neutrophils or something like that. So there was another like sign of inflammation. And they're like, oh, yeah, no signs of inflammation, but your sugar's high and your lipids are high. Let's get you on a statin and start testing your blood every 30 seconds so we could eventually, tell you got to get on glucophage or something. And I was really, really tired. I had like chronic fatigue at the time, and I hadn't really figured out how to solve that. So I was eating like pretty much like a rat, like anything I could find just to get some food in me, because like I wasn't making my own food. I wasn't even boiling ramen. It was just like I was just too screwed up. My hands weren't able to move. I couldn't like lift things. A lot of problems I still have, but to a lesser degree now. And you got high blood sugar and a high lipid profile. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. In fact, the first thing you should ask somebody when they have that is, what's your diet? How are you eating? Instead, they were like, we gotta put you on a statin. We have to. What, there's a fucking rule that I have to take a medication I don't want to take? No. Now my numbers are probably awesome because I've gone back to my, I have a little bit more energy to have my normal diet and to, chop up my veggies. I'm pretty much like almost a vegan. I'm allergic to dairy. So, yeah, and that kind of, I think that was actually happening all my life, but we didn't quite know what I was allergic to. So it became like the dog hair or tuna or whatever. I'm allergic to dairy and egg whites, I think, and wheat. Yeah, I'm that guy who's actually really allergic to wheat. But it's a really low IgE, it's called, I think, for the wheat and the egg whites. So I have to kind of have a lot of it, and then I'll have a reaction. But it doesn't take too much dairy to give me a reaction. For some reason, you kind of have these thresholds. Anyway, so I have these problems, and I got to list them all out, and I got to, pull up any kind of reports I have from doctors that back it up. It's time to kind of make like almost like a lawyer's brief, and say, here's it, here's Exhibit A, here's Exhibit B, even if it's like a stick figure drawing. And the reason I'm saying this, it's not just about me, it's about a lot of times when things are this complicated, it's very difficult to get help unless you do something like this. Unless you organize it so that people know like how these things are interacting. You got to spell it out for them, because doctors aren't really going to do that these days, especially Medicaid doctors or clinical doctors. Although, actually clinical doctors tend to be better, like if you're talking about like clinical psychology. But doctors at clinics, let's call it. And without that kind of report coming in, you're not on the same page, literally. And you need to really get on the same page with your doctors, even if there's a language difficulty, even if they're, not really understanding what you're getting at. You got to like make it as clear as possible in the case that you're making and what you're complaining about and what you're putting out there as your medical problems. Even if you don't understand them so much, just list the symptoms, right? And say, these are the symptoms. I don't know what it is, but nothing's fit so far. Help. Aiuto, aiuto. I think that's Italian for help. And maybe it's not a bad idea for all of us to kind of do that and to kind of have like a medical summary, not just to go in for the clinic, but to go to any doctor, because we don't have that system yet. We don't have a system where everything that's going on with us is immediately available to the doctor. Now, of course, carrying like a binder with all your medicals is probably a bit weird. The only way you could probably do that is if you kind of, you go into the hospital and you always make sure to bring that. It's kind of, it'd be a little bit inconvenient there. It'd be better if it was on a thumb drive or whatever. Whatever you got to do, you got to do. If it's got to be in a binder, and maybe you even have like your medications, like the pamphlets from them, you could shove into one of those pocket things, like a pencil case. And then, you got all sorts of, I've done little things like this, and doctors, oh, this is great. This is so much easier to understand. Honestly, they're humans too. They have a threshold where they hit a wall. It's just if you're ADD, you hit a wall a lot sooner. Okay, so keep that in mind and try to get your medicals together, especially as you get older. And I hope that helps. That's a bit of life advice, at least an idea about it. And that's something I'm going to be doing today. And I'll fill you in on how that works. And I look forward to your interactions.